Welcome back to Poetry Lockdown. We are at day 127. Whoa, the days just keep flying by. Um, so for today's poem, I want to do what I've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks, which is really look at connections between poems, poems in conversation with each other. And if you remember, last week we had a guest lockdown contributor, Michael P. Murphy, director of the Hank Center at Loyola in Chicago. I did such a beautiful job reading and introducing a poem by one of my favorite poets, Christian Wiman. And something about Wyman's play with the word belonging just really moved me. And the way that you read that poem, Michael, really moved me. And then as I was, reading more of Aracelis Girmay's work the last week, and as I think you know, this is a poet who, to my shame, I've just really started reading since the quarantine and just been really moved by her work, and just noticed there was a poem that I kept going back to that was also circling around the word belong and the idea of belonging. And it occurred to me that it'd be worth my while and maybe your while if you're enjoying the lockdown to consider these poems in conversation with each other. So let me start just by um, reading a section, a little stanza from Every Riven Thing, which was the poem that Michael Murphy did for his Poetry Lockdown. And I invite you to check it out just last week on YouTube or Facebook. Um, but there's a section that goes, and this is really a poem about God and how God goes. So it says, to every riven thing he's made, there is given one shade, shaped exactly to the thing itself. Under the tree, a darker tree. Under the man, the only man to see, God goes belonging to every riven thing. So there are lots of different changes that the poet makes on the word belonging. It finds different positions in the sentence. It's a modifier, it's a verb, et cetera, et cetera. But here, there's something about the way that God goes that is as intimate as a shadow. I'm really intrigued by that. To every riven thing he's made, there's given one shade shaped exactly to the thing itself. So for Wyman, at least in this poem, God goes belonging as intimate as a shadow to a person or a tree. Um, so that was Wyman. Now let's think about Aracelis Girmay. So I'm going to read from a poem that's from her collection, The Black Maria, which is about the diaspora from Eritrea, Africa, East Africa, to Europe. And there were many Eritreans who died or drowned on the way. I think more than 20,000. And so Girmay is, she definitely identifies part as Eritrean, Puerto Rican, and African American. I believe those are the ethnicities she identifies with. And this book length poem, which I'm just midway through, so I apologize for any misreadings or non-understanding or interpretations. She's really tracking that diaspora and that journey. And this poem is called Luam, asa-luam, the afterworld sea. And her play with belonging is engaging across language. So she's playing with words from the Tigrinya language, I believe, which is an Eritrean dialect or language. So I've looked up some of the words. She's glossing some of the words. But before I start reading the poem, I want to read a little bit from an interview that she gave with another poet, Claire Schwartz, just about kind of how she looks at language and language play, especially between languages. So she said, because she also reads and writes and thinks in Spanish as well. She says, in Spanish, if I'm reaching for a word, the reaching turns into a kind of walking around the word. Or if I can't find that word, trying to get at it from different angles. I think in English that happens too in different ways. Certainly, writing poems feels like that process to me. Tweaking or the chiropractic movements of revision or conjugations of verb, all that is interesting to me. In his Nobel laureate speech, Derek Walcott talks about the fragments of the Caribbean and the light at dusk. I'm really drawn to that duskiness. I feel like I come from that space. Just as much as I come from the houses of my parents, I come from the highway between them. or this dusky space between English and Tigrinya. It somehow feels like a kind of conscious or unconscious resistance to translation, an inability to be completely brought over into the other thing. If we look closely, that would probably be true for any one of us. I feel like that's something I've known since I was little. There is never complete crossover. There might be a way that I tend to resist reconciliation. I'm really intrigued by that notion. So it's almost the impossibility of translation at the same time that we're playing with that act. So here we go, the poem. Luam, asa-luam. And just to gloss that title, so luam is a Tigrinya word meaning peace-filled, I believe. And in this book, there are four speakers, four luams. One is 9 years old, the sister of Abram, Alexander Pushkin's great-grandfather, who was kidnapped, sold into slavery, and given as a gift to Peter the Great in the early 1700s. I'm reading from the intro to this whole book. It is said that Luam drowned or died at sea. Here she's also a fish or the dead. One Luam is 36 years old. She was born in Asmara, Eritrea, but now lives in Umbertide, Italy, outside of Perugia, where it is idyllic and quiet, and she cleans houses there. One Luam is 36 years old and lives in New York City. So this seems to match up closely with the poet herself, where she teaches school and writes poems, and she was born in the United States. One Luam is 36 and lives in Asmara, where she's a nurse at the hospital. Luam, there it is, means peaceful and restful in Tigrinya. So we've got a meeting of these Luams in Girmay's poem. Here's the poem, long lead up, but I hope it'll be worth it for the conversation between these poems. There was a water song that we sang when we were going to fetch river from the river. It was filled with water, sounds, and pebbles. Here in the after wind with the other girls, we trade words like special things. One girl tells me Mai was her sister's name, the word for flower. She has been saving this one for a special trade. I understand and am quiet a while, respecting, then give her my word, Mai, for water. And another girl tells me Mai is mother in her language, and another says it meant to her what belongs to me. Then belonging suddenly is a strange word or a way of feeling, like to be longing for. And you, brother, are the only one I think of to finish that thought, to be longing for my brother, my brother. And that last word, my brother, she has M-A-I, which is the word that she's playing with, and then M-Y, the possessive in English. So I think what I love the most about both of these poems, the Wiman poem that Michael Murphy read, and this poem that I just read by Aracelis Girmay, is the way that they make strange this word, belonging. I talked about Wiman talking about it as like this God going intimate as a shadow next to the tree, or our shadow next to us. And here, belonging has this idea of really desiring, right? So I mean, I think of belonging as kind of like you belong. It's you're part of the group. But here's like a much much more intense meaning of the word. It seems to me to be longing for, and you, brother, are the only one. And there's a sense in which this word is communicating a separation, like there is something separating. I don't know like the story of the brother and the speaker, but it seems to me that there's something separating them. Maybe death, maybe the sea, and it closes with to be longing for, two separate words, but we're feeling now the force of kind of her new play of what belonging could potentially mean. So that was messy and just my thinking out loud. But hopefully you're intrigued by Girmay's work. She's been someone that I've been, living with her work throughout the quarantine and really recommend. The Black Maria is a great collection. I'm only a third of the way through, and I'm really excited to continue reading. Um, as I close out here, let me just make a call. If anyone is interested, I've been really moved by the guests we've had so far, Michael and Miriam and Father Brown, of course. But if anyone else wants to jump in, if some of these different poets or poems speak to you, please don't hesitate. It'd be fun to have more voices on this. I look at this as a growing conversation. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your day.